Hello, in this presentation we're going to talk about lists within QuickBooks Online. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are in the QuickBooks Online dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. We're going to be talking about lists. When talking about lists for QuickBooks, it's kind of a specialized term. Accounting, of course, has a lot of terminology within it, and QuickBooks actually has some slightly different terminology within the software. When people talk about lists within QuickBooks, they're often talking about a chart of accounts or item lists, and we'll take a look at those two components. Might not be so common to think of them in that format within the online version as the desktop version, because the desktop version had a drop-down called lists, and everything under there would be what QuickBooks defines as their major accounting lists. But as we move to the online version, we still see the terminology of lists, and it's probably going to move over from people that have used the desktop version a lot as they move to more use in the online version. So the lists are going to be the major list of items that we are going to be using, then the chart of accounts and the item lists. So to find those in the online version, we can go down to the accounting section down here, and we'll select that item. And then we have the chart of accounts up top, and then we can go back to the all lists and see more lists here. The chart of accounts is going to be the major list that we would think of. It's going to be, of course, the list of accounts that we will have. And the chart of accounts is typically going to be in order by the account type rather than by name, although we could change the ordering of these items. But typically the default will be by account type, which makes sense because as we look at a trial balance, it will be in order by account type, meaning rather than being in alphabetical order or even order by account number, which is an option that we don't currently have here. And I don't recommend using account numbers unless you understand how the account numbers work. Otherwise, the numbers will get messy. So if you do understand the account numbers, then you can put those in there and make sure that they line up in essence with the ordering of the account types over here. So the detail types, typically it's going to be in order, it will be in order of assets and then liabilities, then equity, then income and expenses. Within those normal accounts, we have the asset of the checking account, the cash account, the bank account. We've got the account type of accounts receivable. Then we've got the other current assets. So here are going to be the other current assets. And then they have more specific here with account type and then the account type detail. So this is the bank and the checking account. This is the accounts receivable, which is just accounts receivable. Other accounts, we could have more specific type of other accounts here that don't fall into either checking or receivable basically, or just other current assets being the default in the other accounts section. And then we have the fixed assets, and that's going to be furniture and fixture, accumulated depreciation. Those are going to be the more long-term assets. Then we got the liabilities, starting with the accounts payable, and that's specialized in accounts payable. Then we've got the credit card accounts. We've got the who we pay our sales tax to, but that's going to be a type of other current liability. In this case, sales tax payable. Other current liabilities, which the generic thing would be other current liabilities within that category. Then we've got other current liabilities, loan payable, and other current liabilities, sales tax payable for other locations. We'll talk about sales tax at a later point. Then we have payroll tax payable as a liability, unearned revenue, other current liabilities. Long-term liabilities then are going to be after that in the ordering of the chart of accounts. These are things due after a year. Then the equity section, so then we're going to have everything within the equity. Remember the overall order, assets, then liabilities, now equity. And then we're going to have revenue or income type of accounts. So here's our income type of accounts, which are more specialized over here in the type of income. And then we're going to scroll down and we have the expenses, starting with the cost of goods sold, and then all other expenses after that. So note that if we have a lot of in a category such as expenses, then it will be in order first by assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense, then possibly by the alphabetical. So now within the expense categories, for example, we have the advertising asset, the A's and then the B's and then the C's within the expense category. But the advertising, of course, is not at the top of the list because we're first in order here by the type of account. This will be one of our driving lists. This will be one of the lists that we will be using when we create every form, every document, because we'll in some way need to be recording to one of these accounts, or two of these accounts will be affected with just about every form that we use, because just about every form we use will have a financial transaction. Every financial transaction has at least two accounts that will be impacted in some way. Now, the other list we could find over here, we could go to all lists on this side and look at the other lists. The major lists are going to be the chart of accounts and the products and services. We could go to the products and services here, or I think the more standard way, when you think about the products and services, that's what we sell. That's the inventory, and that's going to be the type of service items on the inventory that we sell. And I would think that most people probably go to the sales item to find that particular list. So we'll go to sales over here. And then if you go up top, you see the items up top. We're going to go to products and services. So you'll note that although the terminology of list is still down here, this particular list is probably gotten to without going through an item named list, although we still can go to all lists over here. So the name of the differentiation, the specialty of what the term list means in terms of QuickBooks may not be as defined as it would be with the QuickBooks desktop version. Desktop version having that drop down that's just named list, and it's probably the first place people go to when they go to the product list or the chart of accounts. Now, if we scroll through here, this is a little bit unknown, more unknown to people that are just starting. Most people just starting say, hey, the chart of accounts, that makes sense. We need a chart of accounts. The item lists are going to be things that we're going to use in order to generate the invoices. If you've gone through types of accounting, on theory type of accounting, and you record a transaction that we sell inventory, we probably just go through the transaction. We say, well, inventory went up and inventory went down, and the sales went up and down and whatnot. The thing that's going to drive that within QuickBooks is that we first set up those sales items. We set up, for example, the guitar lesson, a service item. So when we have an invoice, we picked this service item, and then the service item will generate the bill in terms of the sales price. So there's the sales price. It will be generated by the service item. If we set these service items up before we generate the invoice, then anybody can then generate the invoice and just pick the selected service item, and the invoice will be populated. So these are really, really important to help the data input process, and important to get set up correctly. So then we have the inventory item. So in our case, we're going to sell guitars. So that's going to be even more complex in that we have a sales price when we generate an invoice or sales receipt, and we have the cost of goods sold or reduction in the inventory. That's a pretty complex journal entry when we make a sales receipt or an invoice. Setting up these service items, these products and services first is really the challenging part in order to make the data input process as easy as possible. And in order to set up this correctly, we really need to understand what the impact is, what the journal entry is, and what that then is affecting on the financial statements, the balance sheet and the income statement. So those are going to be the major lists that we have. If we go back to the all lists, you can look at the other things that QuickBooks will put in terms of lists, but just note that if you hear a term of lists, you're probably not talking to someone that is just talking in terms of financial accounting, taking financial accounting courses in a theory class, probably talking to someone working with accounting software, most likely QuickBooks, that has this more specialized defined term of lists. And when we hear lists, we're typically thinking chart of accounts as a major list, or the products and services as two major components of lists.